I remember I was doing my taxes here, okay, which takes about 5 minutes. And I remember calling IRAS to confirm that I did them right. Over the phone, I was like, thank you so much. I'm never leaving.
Meet Dean Ho, a medical scientist from America who moved to Singapore 6 years ago. He's a professor at NUS and the director of the Institute for Digital Medicine. Dean shared how moving to Singapore lifted a weight off his shoulders, explained how to stay healthy throughout your life, and revealed why he was so shocked as an American when filing his annual taxes in Singapore. I'm Max Chernov, let's go.
I talked to this Spanish lady and she said like, okay, after moving to Singapore, I kind of free my intellectual and mental capacity because I don't need to think about like the huge paperwork that I have to do as like the how to manage traffic and stuff. So it's basically you can focus on the things that really matter to you. Yeah.
You know, I remember I was doing my taxes here, okay, which takes about 5 minutes, right? 3 minutes, 2 minutes. And I remember calling IRAS to confirm that I did them right. It took me less than 1 minute to reach a person at the other end of the phone, which is mythical, by the way, from my thoughts for taxes. And it can, you know, in other countries, it can take forever, right? And after I had this really pleasant talk with the person on the phone, I was like, over the phone, I was like, thank you so much. I'm never leaving. And we both had a chuckle over the phone, both had a laugh, and I meant it because I was like, I don't have to, even kind of procedural things, I don't have to walk in sweating, thinking, you know what, I'm gonna need to take an hour to do this, right? And even when I moved, when I was not living here yet, and I spent time here and I flew back to the US, I've had calls, right, to make sure everything was, all the paperwork was done right with agencies in Singapore. And I remember one time I told my wife, I said, I'm gonna have to call one of the agencies in Singapore. I'll need an hour, right? So I'm gonna be gone for an hour on the phone. And about, no joke, about 3 to 5 minutes later, I walked out of the room and she was like, hey, I thought you had a call. I was like, actually I did, and it's done, right? And she was shocked, right? And I think now living that daily is remarkable. More time with the family that way.
For me, I don't feel they are after me. So I also like file my taxes here, I have a company in Singapore. But I feel like even if I made a mistake, it's not like they put you in jail straight away. They literally will try to help you.
Yes, they'll work with you. Yeah. In fact, I've walked through procedures with staff members from the various agencies, and they were super helpful. And I've actually written back in to tell the agency this person was super helpful, right? They should be rewarded for or awarded for how awesome they were, right? And I think that it's refreshing. To plainly put it, it's refreshing.
For you as an American, here you need to comply. Like you need to you don't supposed to break rules. And also it kind of makes sense because people trust their government, trust the decisions and stuff. But for you as an American, and you saw what was basically not only in the US, but in many places, that people like, okay, no, it's our freedom, it's our rights, you cannot take it out from us. Did you understand yourself better as an American or like your nation, and or you're like, oh, yeah, that's the freedom part, that's the responsibility part. You see what I mean?
Yes, I think that moving to another country, the initial thought process of that is work, okay, and kind of the environment for my family. And spending enough time outside of one's country allows us enough time to kind of take stock of what it was like from a policy and kind of government standpoint. And for me, I think something I've come to, actually, I knew what it would be like, but I've lived it now for 6 years, is the stability here. Okay, it's the stability, but also when we talk about community, it's watching the government look after its people consistently. And what does that look like? Right? For us, when I meet with policymakers, when I see policymakers in action, you can see them with the detail and the time they spend with the residents here. In the US, it's a much larger place. It's harder to kind of capture that in person, right? And when we look at kind of what happens downstream, the safety, the stability, and then the trust, right? The trust in government really kind of, in my opinion, has felt like a weight off my shoulder while living here, right? I, as a person who's moved here, people ask me all the time, like, what do I think about when I wake up in the morning? And a big part of it is gratitude, right? I've moved here, and the fact that myself, my family, and I, we get to kind of feel this sense of security, this sense of having the community around us, I think is deeply meaningful for us.
So you don't think of Singapore as like a nanny state that kind of want to control you? For you, it's like the vice versa, actually.
Yes, for me, I feel kind of a weight off the shoulder whenever I wake up because it's balanced, right? I think that Singapore supports innovation, right? And to be innovative, we kind of have to push the envelope, right? And I think very much so, Singapore has really been able to be at that leading edge of being able to balance the capacity for innovation, for pushing the envelope of innovation, while maintaining trust, while maintaining security, all at once. That's challenging, right? But the country's done very well at that. And then we don't always know, can we feel that on the ground? But I do. You know, living in the US before, I have felt unsafe before. I felt unsafe not too long ago when visiting. And so when you add all of this together, it's professionally fulfilling, but at the heart of it, the security's there, right? And for me, the rules are here to keep us safe too, right? And I feel that every day.
The interview you're watching was recorded using the Shure Move Mic microphone. I can genuinely recommend it to you. It's incredibly small and lightweight, perfect for shooting vlogs, travel videos, or interviews like mine. And you basically need only the Shure Motif video app on your phone to control all audio settings. The Move Mic can operate for up to 24 hours and is designed to withstand rain, spills, and splashes. So you can use it worry-free anywhere. Follow the link in description box. Use the special promo code and get your new cool microphone at a great price. I hope you like it too. You're also advocating, as I understand, for like healthy life, for like exercise and eat healthy and stuff. So, and like speaking about the kind of nation health, do you think the food here, like hawker center food, is kind of healthy food? I know. Because like we can talk about like, let's say fast food in the US, not super healthy. If you want to eat healthy, you need to find your place, to eat healthy. Some, like here, some regions, the food is quite like oily, quite greasy, fat. I don't know if you have an idea about Singapore, what do you think about the food here?
Yes, and we, even though we're an institute for digital medicine, even though I'm part of a biomedical engineering department, I personally, as well as our actual research portfolio, we are interested in food and nutrition. And I think that when we talk about community, when we talk about actionability, I think all cuisines around the world, there are healthier cuisines and there are really tasty cuisines that are also healthy, and then there are really tasty cuisines that are not so healthy or less healthy. I think a shift that we have seen here quite recently is this move to take the foods that we love and then to modify them to be a bit more suitable and aligned with kind of healthier living. And so I would say that there are tastier foods here that may not rank the highest in terms of health, but I think we're quickly finding that some of these adjustments, right, that we maybe don't need as much sugar as we think we do, and the changes are already happening, that foods can still taste good. One thing we're doing is we're actually starting to work with restaurants to look for other switches we can make, different types of oils, even looking at the economics of the food. How can we make it healthier but keep it accessible to the masses? And to use these levers that we have to keep everything tasty, and that's part of our fabric, right? The amazing food culture that we have here, but to really find the best of both worlds. It's totally possible, and some of those changes are happening already.
But I think it probably drives the cost up.
Yes, if you know, there's this notion that eating healthy is way more expensive. We haven't reached into this area yet from our own work, but one of the areas we are looking at is if we look at things like subsidies for healthcare versus potential subsidies and things like that for food, I think there could be a case made once we generate more evidence that certain types of ingredients that are associated with being healthier, if down the road there's room to think about subsidies for those, as a comparison to subsidies for healthcare, we do have some space to work with. And that's actually an area we're looking at right now.
By the way, do you deal with the government authorities, I believe, right?
Yes, I've had a chance to interact extensively with different ministries and to talk about things like the regulation and advancement of innovation, all the way to now some ideas for health optimization that we're looking at in our institute.
How's your experience? Like, are they receptive to new ideas?
I think what's so cool, right, about this ecosystem, which is different from what I'm used to before I moved here, is that part of the key stakeholders that we need to take an idea and get it to people at scale is the policymaking side. And I've had the privilege of interacting with policymakers almost during my first few months here. And what was amazing was the depth of the discussions that have led to action, right? And I think that's what's remarkable. So the reception, clear. And then beyond that, before COVID, we had discussed some of our AI and digital medicine innovations with key policymakers here. And then when COVID happened, it was these policymakers that personally bridged us with those in the clinical community who could help us validate the innovations. And those introductions made it clearly possible for us to validate and then ultimately publish the work and share it with the world. That's reception, but that's also action. Right? And that's actually helped us get our innovations to people. And one of them was a COVID drug optimization platform, right? The policymakers studied it with us and directly linked us with those who could validate it. That's real action.
Dean is such an inspiration. Meeting people like him is actually why I started this channel. And if you want me to help you find your niche and understand its profit and use potential and take the first steps towards your YouTube channel, then come to my 3-day online workshop. It's free. I'm giving away a ton of expertise about the YouTube game. So check it out, link in description.
I've been several times in LA. I love the vibe of the place, especially for YouTube. Like, it's actually the biggest place for YouTube in the world. I have some friends there.
Yes.
Some of them live in like Las Vegas and San Diego, but all the events are in LA itself. But I interview a lot of people, and some people say like, oh, California is very difficult to live now. It's like a lot of problems, taxes, homeless population stuff. What are your thoughts about like the trends that are going in LA right now?
When we think of LA, we think of it as a hub for certainly show business. And I think the show business history of LA plays a big role in kind of its massive growth, right? And this being a focal point of entertainment. Growing up, I think I'm really like into the entertainment scene in the sense that I love movies. I love productions and watching all the newest movies and the shows and sporting events as well. But I think that's not really where my career is. And I think that some of the challenges with LA is being a very show business town, the kind of the hours that are there, the resources that are there, the kind of the way of life, the dialogue, it's very different from the field that I want to be in. So I think from a standpoint of going there and, you know, from a vacation standpoint, maybe getting little bits of it, it's a great place. My friends are still there. I still have family there. But I think from the standpoint of things like healthcare innovation and seeing ideas make it all the way to people, the priorities in the town are a little bit different. I think for show business, one of the top places in the world.
Yeah.
I think as we've evolved post-COVID, I think the show business model is changing also, right? We're getting other parts of the country incentivizing filming outside of California. And so following those trends as well, I think that LA is still a great place for great weather. It's still a great place for food, seeing movie stars.
Yeah.
It's still a great place for that. I think when it comes to redefining where we are in terms of caring for patients, I think that's why I'm here in Singapore.
What about everyday life?
Yeah, when we think about everyday life in LA, one thing that I didn't realize about myself is, until now living here, is LA is very spread out, okay?
Sure.
And I think people might be interested when they learn that there is public transportation in LA, but it's challenging because it's so spread out that I've had friends who have had to drive to a location to park their car, whether it's a shared ride or whatnot, and then take public transportation somewhere else. And then here they got to get back in your car. And then the highways are very congested. And so everyday life, when I think about LA, the first thing that comes to mind is traffic. And it's not trivial, because if it takes me over an hour to get to one place and then over an hour to get back, and that's kind of the daily routine, that's a challenge. The second thing I'll mention is we have young kids, and especially during weekends, kind of shuttling young kids around is something that in some cases can consume weekends. Something that we have here that I'm still marveled by is, kids can take car bookings like Grab on their own, and it's super safe, right? And I think when my friends in LA hear about that, part of them, they're in awe, and they're really wishing they could do that, and part of them, they're just super surprised, right? I think traffic, people plan their lives around traffic in LA.
Yeah.
And I'll say, when I first moved to Singapore, I was about 45 minutes early to every meeting I had, because it's in my DNA. It's in my DNA to budget at least an hour for every meeting I have to go to. So I've had times where I show up to a meeting and it's more than 45 minutes early. There was one incident where my meeting was running late, and I'm like, you know what, for the first time, I'm gonna be late to a meeting here in Singapore. I happened to book a Grab, and just like I had about 15 minutes to get to my next meeting way off site, I book a Grab that happens to be at the place I'm at already. So I run downstairs, I still ended up about 7 minutes early to the next meeting. And so living in LA, I think we revolve around traffic. And I think when our kids get older and we want to really spend more time with them, when you're losing hours a day to traffic, whether it's work, whether it's family, it takes a toll.
Yeah, it's also help for your social life. It's like you don't think twice if you're invited for some event. It's like I used to live in the big cities. I used to live in Moscow for a few years. And then it's like Friday night, let's say, like someone is inviting you like unexpectedly to like somewhere, the different end of the town. And then it's like, okay, I need to go change back home. And it's like, okay, hour and a half. Then another like hour and a half to the place. And it's like, should I go? In Singapore, it's not like that. Yeah, of course, I go.
You actually just raised a really important point. When I was in LA, I remember some of our dinners would be in downtown LA, because downtown LA at one point really was becoming a hot spot for new and hip restaurants. But going at the wrong time, it's an hour and a half, right? And we've had Uber drivers kind of, because I think at the time they couldn't screen the rides. And so we get in the car and they're like, oh my gosh, we have to go to downtown LA. And it was an hour and a half. And that matters because this was when our children were younger. And so we had to get babysitters, right? And then kind of planning around the uncertainties of traffic. Sometimes we were afraid that we didn't want to overstay a social outing, and then the babysitter would have to stay behind. So sometimes we would get home too early, right? Because we thought traffic would be so bad coming home. So traffic really does kind of govern our planning of our schedules and getting to places, and in some cases, deciding even if we want to go in the first place.
Yeah. How would you compare the field, your professional field over there and over here, and what are the other big hubs in your field, like worldwide? I
work in the area of digital medicine, looking at things like AI and specifically to optimize treatment for patients. UCLA is where I was before. It's a great university. It's a global powerhouse for research. One major thing that drew me to Singapore and the National University of Singapore was that the work that we do really spans kind of idea creation all the way to validation with patients. We're actually using our technologies to treat patients here in our trials. In order to take that, to even achieve that, I think it's a big deal, right? To be able to kind of cross that entire bridge of validation is a big, big deal. But if you want to help 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, or 1,000,000 people, we need many stakeholders accessible to each other, right? We need technology developers, we need doctors, we need economists, we need behavioral scientists, all the way to the insurance sector. And one major amazing element of Singapore is that the accessibility of all of these stakeholders is unmatched. It's truly unmatched. And when that accessibility is there, lives get saved, right? That time that we save, that efficiency that we have, patients are helped, lives are saved. Los Angeles is an amazing place, right? But the thing is, Los Angeles has its focus of great healthcare systems, but our ecosystem there is a big place, and the other stakeholders that we need can sometimes be 6 hours away by flight. And when that happens, it becomes harder to close those gaps quickly.
And talking about Singapore, you mean like the people in Singapore or people in the region? So it's like
Yes.
easy to come and stuff?
Yes, when we think about the key stakeholders that we need, right, from ideas to validation, regulation, implementation, these are the stakeholders in Singapore. It is remarkable to wake up each day, and if I need to speak to our regulators, they're right there, 10 minutes away. If we need to look at the policy side, 10 minutes right here. If we need to speak to a specific doctor or multiple doctors in a discipline, they're all here. It's very different living in much larger ecosystems where maybe there's more patients to help. But to get to that stage, we need to get the stakeholders lined up. And so we think about hubs, right? There are other hubs both in the region and the world where, you know, innovation can be advanced. If you look at Switzerland, if we look at Taiwan as an example as well. But when it comes to having each stakeholder ready to go, ready to learn with us, ready to advance with us, I tell people all the time, there is no other ecosystem like Singapore. And when we have this kind of workflow ironed out, lives are saved, innovation is accelerated, and at the end of the day, the world benefits from that. Right, when we're able to validate these innovations and then share these findings with the world.
Let's talk about the education system. You were in UCLA, now you're in NUS. NUS is like I think it's the most well-known university, like school in Singapore and maybe in Asia also. How would you compare these two great schools?
You know, UCLA is a powerhouse entity. It has a medical school, law school, great engineering school. And I think what was important and what was kind of a driving force for UCLA is the ability to get different disciplines together to do research. What moved me from UCLA to NUS is that I think there was a chance for us to redefine what impact meant, right? At a UCLA, the impact is different disciplines coming together to do good work together and to publish good papers, right? That's the impact. At NUS, we have a great medical school, we have a great law school, business school, but we also have this ecosystem that's next to NUS, which is the regulatory system, the startup ecosystem, also backed by an amazingly strong government and policy system here, so that for us, we can measure impact by the number of people that we benefit by our innovations, because they're here. And those that can help us bridge our ideas to these people are here. But what that means for education is the students who are a part of this journey also graduate with a different sense of what impact means. And we're able to show our students how to take an idea and how to get to know the person we're trying to help or the community we're trying to help, because they're right here. And to bridge an idea all the way through to that endpoint. That's real impact.
What are your own rules for your own health? Like, what do you do? Like, what kind of exercise? Like, what's your rules for food?
So when it comes to my own rules for food, I generally fast for at least 20 hours a day.
Every day?
Every day, except on every weekday. Now, I can keep this going 7 days a week. On some occasions, I'll do what's called a 18-6 fast, where I don't eat for 18 hours and I eat for 6, but typically it's a 20/4. And then once a month, I will fast for 48 hours. And then once a quarter, I will fast for 72 hours. And when I do these longer fasts, I do a blood test before and I do a blood test after to see how my body changes over time. And then on a more or less more consistent basis, I will collect bloods on my own with various devices to track different markers that I have. And what am I ultimately looking for? I'm looking at my metabolic health. There are very clear ways to monitor what we call metabolic switch, our ability to switch from sugar burn to fat burn. And studies have shown that this could be neuroprotective and heart protective as well. It's a very clear quantifiable readout, right? So when I do this fasting regimen, I look at these markers. I work out every day, 7 a.m., 90 minutes a day. I'll do about 5 days a week of strength training with weights and about 2 days of cardio, intense cardio of running and sprints. And I hold true to this all the time. When I'm traveling, I always hit the gym on arrival. I always hit the gym before I take off and return home back to Singapore. And then my dietary regimen is very consistent. I call it green and lean. As many green foods as I can take, lean protein, multivitamin, seeds, chia seed, etc. I try to keep a very consistent regimen.
Let's start with fasting. Would you recommend it to everybody, almost everybody?
It's a great question. I think that much like what we see with our patients when looking at personalization, it should not be one size fits all. Some people shouldn't fast at all, right? When we look at the diabetic population, probably shouldn't fast, or at a minimum, everybody should be consulting a doctor before they do this. However, I'll say that not everybody needs to fast for 16 hours, 18, or those who can fast, not everybody needs the 16 hours or the 18 hours or the 20 hours or even the longer fasts. I'll tell everybody that years ago, I ate at least 3 meals a day, sometimes way more. And I kicked everything off in the morning with coffee, with sugar and milk. But over time, I felt to myself, I think I want to improve my health. And so what did I do? A very small habit. I cut the sugar out of my coffee. And it was hard in the beginning, right? And I did that and I was thinking, maybe I'm ready to give up, right? But after I stuck with it, I thought to myself, I think I can do more, right? So I added another habit. I removed the milk. And then over time, I actually started to really savor the flavor of good coffee. At the time, though, it wasn't only coffee for my breakfast. I had waffles, Pop-Tarts, toast. But then eventually I started feeling better by cutting the sugar out from the coffee and the milk out. And so I started cutting out the carbs. Eventually to the point where after a few months, I got to just coffee in the morning, black, right? And at that point, unbeknownst to me, I started fasting, right? It was a 16-8 fast. I only ate lunch and dinner. And then as time went on and I really started to feel better and my energy was high, I was able to work out consistently and I saw benefits to my workouts, I started pushing my lunch back. And over the course of years, I got to what's considered to be this OMAD, O-M-A-D, 1 meal a day type of regimen. It all started with just cutting sugar out. And I tell people, if in the end, after many months, they just cut out the sugar, that's a win, right? Not everybody has to push too hard, too fast towards fasting, right? And some people shouldn't fast, right? And depending on where they are in their life, some people should wait before they fast, but everybody should consult a doctor. But it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And part of the fun of it is modulating, changing the fasting duration, sometimes, or even the time of day when we eat. Sometimes I eat dinner, sometimes I switch it to lunch, right? And part of that is the fun of trying different routines.
How old were you when you started thinking about, maybe I need to change something?
I was, when it came to thinking about modifying my lifestyle, it was in my mid-20s. And the reason for that was my mid-20s is when I started my independent career. And I happened to live in Chicago, which is another city of great food. And this was before we had children. And I was relatively young at the time. And so I thought to myself, I was invincible, right? I could eat whatever I want. I could sleep well, wake up and do it all over again. But then there came a point where at the time my doctor came in and said, hey, look, this is your body weight over the last couple of years. This is your cholesterol over the past couple of years. If you don't do something about this, you're going to end up with heart disease. And that woke me up. I started working out consistently. I'd worked out before, but I started working out consistently and I lost weight. I lost weight, cleared out the cholesterol numbers, and my doctor said he was amazed. He was like, I rarely see people do this without medicine. And I think that was a switch for me. That's the thing about healthy aging, about longevity. We often think that we may need to approach the population that's in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, or even later. But it's actually the whole of population, right? I think if we can try to help generate better habits while also learning how to enjoy life at the same time that benefits our population as a whole.
I noticed that you have this kind of device.
Yes.
Here. That's the glucose.
Yes. Yes. This is a continuous glucose monitor.
Glucose monitor, right.
So I actually use this for, in some cases, slightly different purposes than the standard glucose monitoring, because my diet is very low in carbs. And so my glucose is actually quite flat.
Yeah.
But what I do is when I lift weights, this releases sugar from my system. So I actually see this really cool spike when I'm lifting weights. And I use that, right? When I lift weights and I see the spike, I will take that data point there, or those data points. And then the next day when I lift weights again, over time, the spikes get smaller and smaller, right? And at that moment is when I then start to see a switch, and I switch to fat burning. And reasons I like this is I just kind of like a running tally of how my glucose levels are. Sometimes during a long fast, I want to make sure things are okay. And then also to monitor workout intensity.
What's your sleep routine? When you go to sleep, like how many hours you need to sleep to feel good?
You know, I think there's been a lot of discussions that certain people need less sleep than others, but I try to get at least 7 hours of sleep every day. For me, I travel a lot, right? And so I think that in the past several years, I've prioritized sleep quite a bit. Because when we think about longevity and health, I tell people that everybody's behavior tends to cause them to focus on something. When they hear about different approaches to boosting health, somebody's going to be listening to food. Somebody's going to be listening for supplements. And somebody's going to be listening for things like sleep and fitness, right? But I think what we really have to view this as is a combination. And there's no free lunch, right? I think no single pill is going to help us live much longer with high quality of life. I don't think there's a single food that will do that. I don't think solely one exercise will help us get there. But I think we have to view this as a combination, because that's how we treat major illnesses as well, as combinations, right? And so I think that moving forward, sleep is an essential pillar of good health. I try to go for at least 7 hours, 8 if I can make it happen, but it is heavily prioritized, be it when my feet are on the ground and I'm here in Singapore, or when I'm on travel.
Let's say you had an important meeting with the government authorities, with like business people, and then they go out, let's say at 11, 12, they go clubbing and stuff. So what's your decision-making process?
When we think about social events in the evening and how that may or may not fit in with my health optimization regimen, we're talking about potentially losing sleep, drinking alcohol, and eating too many fried foods. And I'd say my younger self might say yes to all three. Right now, things are a bit different. I do try to get home at a proper hour because I work out every day. I really do work out every day. If I'm getting home at 4 in the morning, that's going to make that not possible, right? The exercise. Yeah. And so I do make it a point to socialize as well as I can, but to excuse myself when it's time to get home at a proper hour. When it comes to the alcohol and the food, when it comes to consuming alcohol, I really look at maybe a very modest amount once or twice a year, maybe once a quarter at most. Yeah. And something that does not disrupt my sleep, and something that allows me to work out the next morning. One might say, well, Dean, how do you enjoy yourself? Well, that brings us to the food. I do fast, and I do eat lean and green, but I do have a great relationship with good food. And something that I think has happened over the past few years is that when I kind of eat something that's not green or lean, I enjoy it, and I'm able to bounce right back and get back on the plan immediately. But I will say that I have fasted before during working lunches. I have fasted during working dinners. I think there's a way to balance being polite and also kind of informing people why I'm doing this. And things have gone different directions. I've had people ask me for the next hour afterwards, why, what am I measuring? And it's fascinated them, all the way to the point where some of them are now fasting also. I've had cases where I go to a dinner and I mention politely, thank you so much. I apologize. Please make yourselves comfortable, but I'm gonna fast. But we're gonna discuss. Yeah. We're gonna have a great evening. And I've had other people at the table say, Dean, I also fast. And now that I find that you're fasting, would you mind if I joined you? And I've had impromptu people join-ins for the fasting as well. So I've seen it all, right? But I think that there's a balance that can be had. I still enjoy the food. And if I go out late for social events, I'm going to enjoy the food.
The big trend now in Singapore is ice bathing. Do you do it? And what do you think? Is it really very good for your health?
I do own an ice bath now.
Okay.
As of about a month ago, I own an ice bath, and I enjoy it. I've had good friends here introduce me to the ice baths, and I will say in the beginning, I was a little scared in the beginning, right? Just dipping one leg in, I was thinking, can I do this? And then after doing my first 2 minutes in an ice bath, I felt invincible. Okay, I felt invincible, and it was really a true rush and also sustained source of energy for me. And then I took some time off, and then eventually when they became commercially available, we bought an ice bath at home. And one reason we did that was my wife recently recovered from spinal tumor surgery, and I really wanted to help explore if ice baths could help her with recovery, with pain management. And she plunges almost every day, right? And she's super consistent. She loves it. And she rolls right into yoga, or she joins and does a plunge right after yoga. And I myself collect data, right? I collect data while I'm plunging. And I'm learning. It's fascinating, right? The role that plunging can have, and potentially looking at things like glucose management and metabolic switch. And even maybe recovery for me. I'm looking at things, in very specific segments, but I love it. And I do it regularly.
What would be your, let's say, the list of 3 advice for people who want to be healthier but super busy? What would be your advice?
When it comes to different tips for people who want to be healthy amidst busy schedules, I think the first thing is to ask yourself, what is the goal you want? Why are you undertaking certain habits to be healthier? And I think that could possibly serve as a guiding light, right? Something that one can be the reason for sticking to something. One thing to note is, for that reason, those reasons can change over time, and that's okay, right? So have that guiding light for why we want to be healthy. The second thing is, be kind to yourself, right? When we have a busy schedule, we don't want healthy behaviors to be in conflict with the importance of whether it's providing for family or things like that. So be kind to yourself, right? It's okay to be adaptive, and one can be consistent while respecting the busy work schedule. The third thing is, start with small habits, right? Starting with small habits, that allows us to introduce things that fit that schedule. And as we get used to them, as we are more comfortable with these small habits, we can maybe start to add habits to that organically. And when it's organically done, it helps boost the chances of adherence, sticking with it, right? So I think thinking about these things, the guiding light, being kind to yourself, and starting with small habits, hopefully ends up with some good outcomes.
What's the meaning of life for you?
For me, the meaning of life is giving back to people. I think that when we look at what drives me with work, it's we want to come up with things and ideas that ultimately help the people in our community and worldwide, right? And I think there's no better gratification than to think of something that's new and to test it out, and then to ultimately see people's lives made better by it. And that's why I'm here in Singapore. That bridge from an idea to actually helping people at scale, no better place in the world to make that happen here in Singapore.